Let me, yes, the study guide was sent to your email. It was sent out to the whole class via group email. So you should have received that. I want to say Sunday, I believe, Melanie. So I'm taking you did not receive the study guide?
I'm looking for it right now, but
Okay.
it was on Sunday, right?
Yeah, check Sunday. I believe it was sent out on Sunday.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, give me 1 second to share my screen. I'll get the study guide pulled up. Okay. Okay. Bear with me 1 second, you guys. I got a new computer, so shit's a little different. So bear with me. Hold on. Shit. Fuck. Shit. Okay. Correction. I can't. Shit. I can't share my screen without restarting Zoom. So what we're gonna have to do is work through the study guide together. Melanie, you found the study guide, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does everyone have a copy of the study guide? Because I'm not gonna be able to share my screen. So I want to make sure that you're able to look at the study guide. Okay. So
Yeah, I got one.
let me print out mine and then we'll work through it. Give me 1 second, y'all. So did anyone have a chance to look over the study guide prior to today? No? Okay. All right. So I've broken the study guide up into themes, and the themes are kind of based off of the readings and what we covered throughout the semester. So the first theme is the question dealing with who are African people. This is strictly pulled from the first lecture that I gave for the semester. This was not a reading. This was strictly the lecture with the slides, right? And I asked you, I'm asking you, how old are African people? And then why is that information important as it pertains to history? And then name for me 2 African individuals and their significant contributions prior to European conquest or the inception of modernity. And we know that modernity is just a term that's used to insinuate European conquest and conquering. So as it pertains to how old African people are, there's 3 acceptable answers. Who could provide for me any of these 3 answers? How old are African people? It's the first week of class, the first thing that we covered.
Is one like they were the first humans on Earth?
But I gave you guys specific dates and time.
Wasn't it 3.2 million to 8 million years?
Yep. So we have 3.3, 8 million, and there's one other answer that I say is acceptable.
Wasn't it unknown because of yeah.
And why is they unknown, Michael?
Because constantly with history, as we continue digging and finding new bones, the older Africans are.
Perfect. So if you're going to use unknown as an answer, which I would say is the most accurate answer, right? You must include that latter part. It's unknown because after the more that they dig and excavate, the older African people become. So you have to add that into your conversation, into your discourse. Okay, no worries, so Shanti, we'll spend time going through the rest of it today. So again, it's going to be up to you all. We could go through answering the questions, or I could just read through the themes and we can have a discussion about them, and you guys can pose questions. It's totally up to you. It's your time. I want to do what you feel is necessary to get you all prepared, okay? So the next bullet point under the question of who are African people, we're dealing with the readings, the teaching of Ptah-hotep, right? And then it says, what is significance about the teaching of Ptah-hotep as it pertains to understanding who African people truly are, right? How does the text speak to the values and principles that shaped ancient African societies, right? So what this question is trying to get you to think about, what within the text, the teaching of Ptah speaks to who African people really are, speaks to the values and the principles that structured and guided ancient African societies, right? So you should be able to kind of have that conversation, have that discourse as it pertains to the teaching of Ptah and should be able to answer the questions. Does anybody want to answer them, or does anyone have any questions about what is posed here? Okay, so we'll move on to the second one. The second section is dealing with stereotypes, and then the text, the destruction of Black civilization. Looking at Joel, is it Joel Harris? Yeah, Joseph Harris, excuse me. Looking at Joseph Harris' text, Africans and Their Histories, the chapter, A Tradition of Myths and Stereotypes. I want you to be able to engage Harris's assertion that European expansion's greatest contribution to the New World. So what does he say is European expansion's greatest contribution to the New World? He states this very explicitly. We spent a good amount of time dealing with this in the lecture that we gave on this text as well. Another thing I want you to think about or be able to engage in the conversation around, think about the role religion, Christianity in specific or in particular, has played in shaping the view and image of African people. Be prepared to engage in a discourse on the role some scholars play in trying to diminish African contributions to human civilization by displacing Kemet out of Africa. So another claim that Harris makes within the text is some scholars seek to move Kemet out of Africa and situate it in the Middle East. And this does the work of diminishing the African contribution to civilization. Why is that, right? So you should be able to answer that. And then also speak to the role that religion played in shaping the view and understanding of African people. Does anyone want to try to answer that question, or does anyone have questions about that topic of inquiry? Go ahead, Michael.
All right, so I remember, at least with the Africans and Their History text, that we went over like how the Europeans essentially like called Africans animalistic and savage, right?
Yeah.
I trying to remember how religion was involved. That doesn't really come to mind. Like,
okay. Does anyone want to help answer Michael's question? How was religion used to set these stereotypes in place as it pertains to the text by Harris?
I can try.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry if it's a little loud here. So I think you mentioned that European expansion's greatest contribution was anti-Blackness, and that the Christianity helped this by talking about, Cain, I think.
Ham.
I'm sorry. Ham, Ham, and how he was born, like he was cursed, and Black people were the descendants of of this cursed person. So it was okay to enslave them.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee. So does everyone get what Lee's saying, what the argument is? One of the contributions of Christianity to this sentiment of anti-Blackness or Black inferiority is this idea of the curse of Ham, right? And Ham being the oldest descendant, quote unquote, of African people. And Ham is cursed due to the fact that he laughed at his father, was it Noah? I may be wrong, I forget the father, but he laughed at his father in his drunken and naked state, right? So because of him doing so, this insinuates the curse of Ham, which follows Black people throughout their experience here in the Western world, right? So he's spot on, Lee is spot on in his articulation. Also the notion that European expansion's greatest contribution to the New World was the concept of Black inferiority, or as Lee articulates, anti-Blackness. I would accept either or, but the text actually says the concept and the idea of Black inferiority. And then it says the Christian error ushered in another dimension. A most decisive, derogatory racial tradition stems from the biblical interpretation of Noah's curse of Ham, So that goes back to what Lee is talking about, and that's pulled directly from the reading. Does anyone else want to add to Michael's question around the role of religion? Does anyone else have a question about this text before I move on to the next one? Okay, so now we're looking at Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization, The Great Issues of the Race, from 4500 BC to 2000 AD. So think about the effects of fragmentation and isolation had on African nations, and how were forms of African communication forever changed, right? So in the text, they talk about because of the migration, right? And because of the, at this time, the Arabic and slave trade, African people are forced to migrate, and they're forced to separate from themselves, from their larger groups, right? And this has a very lasting effect. One of the effects is due to the way that African people would communicate, right? So you should be able to think about that, be able to answer questions around that. I also am asking you to think about the role Arabic invasion and enslavement, along with the migration of Asian and later European migrants, led to the mixing of African nations, and what were the effects of this mixing. So be able to talk to what brought Asian, European, and Arabic migrants to the Nile Valley, right? And I'm kind of giving you a hint there within that, just saying it that way. What brings them to the Nile Valley, excuse me. What is the byproduct of the mixing that takes place within these cultures? So you should be able to speak to that as well. Does anyone want to answer that question, or does anyone have a question around that question? All right, so we'll move into the next section. We're looking at the old new world, the striving of spirits, and the anti-lynching journalism. So the old new world pertains to Ivan van Sertima. And if you think about why I call it the old new world, it's the new world, right? The Americas, but it's old to African people because we've been there before, right? And this goes to the argument from they came before Columbus by Ivan van Sertima. So the question is how, right? So think about this question of how, the methodology. How does Van Sertima produce his thesis in They Came Before Columbus, the chapter Mandingo Traders in Medieval Mexico? Prepare to engage in a discourse, and a discourse is just a conversation, right? That's all that means. Prepare to engage in a discourse on the two most foundational elements of the cultural confluence between African and indigenous culture, and why was Mexico such a central area of focus for Van Sertima? And if you think about that reading, you know that within answering the previous question, you'll have the answer to why Mexico becomes important. Does anyone want to speak to or have a question about this inquiry? Go ahead, Michael.
All right, so with this section, at least what my notes said, so we went about like how he portrayed his thoughts, right? What I have written down is that there was heavy detail on the geography and as well as the languages they use. There are many examples of where, and then as well as fashion as well. I have a quote from the bottom of page 103 and 104 from that text. And it's like, since the Mexican feather workers designed coat of arms and were heavily influenced, as we have seen, by the Mandingo merchants, it is only expected to be that some of these designs would be carried over. So in regarding how it was portrayed in his how he portrayed his thesis, I feel like there was a lot of elevation and a lot of elaboration with how there's essentially multicultural and integration of cultures. That's at least the first part.
So absolutely. So one, the cultural confluence is one, right? So that's one way. And also he mentions the language confluence, because there's several languages where the root word has African origins, right? So that's another way that they had the cultural confluence, but also religion, right? Because they had the werewolf god, and the Western Hemisphere indigenous people tried to assimilate as best as possible the werewolf god, but what they had in the Western Hemisphere, right? So the werewolf became the coyote, and those things, right? So we're looking at language and religion as the two foundational points of confluence. Why does Van Sertima seek to focus on Mexico? Anybody remember why? Go ahead, Cole.
Because shortly after, not shortly, but not too long after that, the conquistadors arrived, and their arrival was a lot different than when the Africans arrived, because they were violent and
Okay. So
stabilized.
you're right, Cole. That's what I said in the lecture. But from the text, right? Van Sertima seeks to focus on Mexico because you see a confluence of culture, i.e. religion and language, not just of blood, right? Because oftentimes when you have these mixings, because of, of course, sex, right? The blood is mixed, but you don't see other elements of the culture mixed like language and religion. So Van Sertima is focusing on Mexico because in Mexico, you can see not just the cultural, sorry, not just the confluence of blood, but you get the cultural confluence of language and religion, okay? But you're right in the sense of that's what I articulated in the conversation of the lecture, that the way that African peoples engaged with other cultures was vastly different from the way that European conquest came in and sought to take over and to destroy. So you're not wrong. Does everyone understand the distinctions I'm making in regards to how cultural confluence was important in Mexico opposed to other areas? Okay. So we're moving into the boys, the souls of Black folks, the chapter of our spiritual strivings. One, what is the thesis of the text? And he states it very plainly and very clearly, and I articulated that throughout my lecture as well. Very clear thesis of the statement, which ties to the chapter's title, right, of our spiritual strivings. How does Du Bois employ the veil, and how does the veil relate to the two worlds? How would you situate double consciousness into Du Bois's thesis? And what does Du Bois offer as a solution to double consciousness? Does anyone want to try to answer these questions, or does anyone have a question about these questions? All right. So the last one is the video that we watched last week. Looking at the work of Ida B. Wells. So how does the life and work of Ida B. Wells disrupt static and conventional understandings of history? How did Wells' journalist work bring attention to the American phenomenon of lynching? What were the main causes of lynching? And what were the perceived causes for lynching? What is your contemporary analysis for the Wells documentary, and how is the legacy of her work continued? Does anyone want to speak to or have any questions about these questions? All right. Well,
I was going to ask more about the disruption of the static and conventional understanding of history.
so like more clarity on what I'm asking there?
Yeah, well, just kind of like what? Yeah, maybe what a little bit more about what the answer is to that.
Yeah. So let's deal with what's being posed, right? So you have an idea based off the documentary, the work that she did, right? So now I'm asking you about static and conventional understandings of history, right? So typically when we understand his story, it's still typically storing happenings from the past from the lens and the vantage points of male dominated lenses, as well as white dominated lenses. So Ida B. Wells' work, one, situates women as the center of the work, a woman of culture at the center of the work. And even if we are to look at it from a historical standpoint, looking at African history, right, or the history of African Americas, she's still kind of erased from that history, right? So what her work does, it places focus on Black women's historical phenomenon, and it moves Black women from the periphery to the center, right? And that's how we disturb and it disrupts these static understandings of what history is. Because if we're only going through the conventional static understandings of history, you're only going to know about Du Bois. You're only going to know about Carter G. Woodson, right? But when we get into the work of Ida B. Wells, she disrupts that, and she broadens how we begin to understand what history and who can make history. So does that give you a little bit more clarity, Cole? Okay. Anyone else have any other questions, comments, or concerns? What I would encourage you all to do, if you still have questions, there's two ways to go about this. You could either look at the questions being posed by each section, right? And then watch the lecture that was tied to that section. or go back and read your notes from when you had the reading, right? And that's to see if you can answer the questions. If you can answer all these questions that are posed within the study guide, you'll do fine on the test. If there's things that you feel a little bit more confusing or unclear to you, I would suggest either reread that reading, or again, watch the lecture again, or revisit your journal, right? Your journal is also serves the purpose of notations to help you. You all right, bro? It also serves as a source of notation to help you prepare for the midterm. Also, if you still feel a little bit confused, you have Wednesday, you can jump into Wednesday's conversation. We'll be doing the same thing. Wednesday's group may ask more questions than you guys did today. I'm not sure, but that's another way to help prepare yourself. I will be sending this out no later than Friday, and it will be due the upcoming Monday along with your journals. Is there any other questions? Because that's all I have for you today. If you don't have any questions, we'll call it a day.
I got a question.
Yeah.
Regarding about the midterm. So are we gonna pick on like the two top topics, or?
So what will happen is I'll email you on Thursday or Friday, one of the two. You'll have 5 questions. There'll be 5 essay questions based on these themes that are on this study guide. And then you'll choose 3 of the 5 questions to answer. And then as long as you answer them in their entirety, you should get full points.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Go ahead, Michael.
For our midterm, did you want us to have like quotes or excerpts from our text, or would you rather have it with none?
I think it would be good to have them, right? I'm not going to knock points if you don't have them, if you answer the question, but as you get older, and you're not older, but as you get deeper into your academic pursuits, right, you're going to be able to use, you're going to need to use these sources. Also, the sources will help support your answer, or it will help give you your answer depending on how you phrase it, right? So it's a good question, Michael. I think you would be better off by using the sources or the quotes, but you don't have to, and you won't be knocked if you don't have them. But good question. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Mhm. You sure? Because we still have like a half hour left in class. I want to make this is dedicated to get you all prepared for your midterm. Some of y'all asked questions, some of y'all ain't said shit. I just want to make sure that you're prepared. And I don't want to be like, yo, he didn't prep us for the midterm. This is what this time is designed for. Are you sure? All right. If there's no further questions, we'll call it a day. If you do have any questions, feel free to holler at me. We can set up another Zoom or whatever we need to do to answer that question. If not, I could email it to you or even text. That's all that's on the table. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your week. Be healthy, be wealthy, be wise. If you don't feel that you've gotten the preparation that you need, you can always jump into Wednesday's lecture to get that preparation. If not, the midterm itself will be sent out no later than Friday. You'll submit that on the following Monday along with your journal. Those will both be submitted to the Google Classroom site. There'll be sections for you to submit those there. Y'all good? No other questions?
Professor, one last question. I just thought of it. So for the journals, I think you said at the beginning of the semester, you don't need anything really fancy, just to see that we took notes.
Well, so just see that you address the 4 components, right? So the 4 components are the thesis of the reading, your analysis for the reading. How did you make sense of the reading? Your contemporary analysis. So how did what you read relate to what's going on in our world today? And then any questions that you may have. So long as you have those 4 components, that's a perfectly good journal entry for me. I'm not worried about how long it is, just long as you address those 4 inquiries. Does that make sense, Lee?
Okay, so it's like, okay, if it was bullet points or
Yes.
or what? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Any other questions? Again, I would encourage you to revisit the lectures. They're all on your Google Classroom site under recorded lectures. And if not, use your journals. And if not, worst case scenario, reread the readings if you feel you need to, and that will get you prepared. Other than that, though,